Greetings Endgame fans. Now in this video, the Woldsman is going to look at 4 more endings that occurred in 4 separate divisions of the 4 National Chess League online tournament. So all the 4s. As ever, the positions are chosen for their instructional value, recognizing that players of all abilities make and can learn from mistakes. Now the time control for this event was 45 minutes plus 15 seconds increment per move. And so this is a factor that needs to be taken into account. It's just impossible to play endings well with little time to think. But on the other hand, this does generate opportunities for alert players. Okay, well let's get to the action. We're going to start with Division 1 and we'll work our way down. But we're actually going to find that the endings become more interesting and complex as we go down the divisions. And we're saving the best until last, as you will see. Okay, so on the board, we have a rook versus rook and rook's pawn ending. Now, if you've seen the Woldsman's video on this ending, you will know that in this position, with white to play, he should definitely be considering the move rook f5. Cutting the enemy king off along the 5th rank. And this rook f5 move would leave black with no chance at all of saving the game. It would be very strong. But white was too hasty. And in the game, he didn't go rook f5. He pushed his pawn immediately and went h5. And this was a mistake because it gives black's king the opportunity to cross the 5th rank and head over to the queening square h8, which is what black wants to do in this position. So now white played the very reasonable try h6, and he was immediately rewarded by black's reply. Black went rook g2 check, and this is a losing move, and it loses because it drives the white king where he wants to go. White went king h5. And after rook h2 check, king g6, so you see the white king wants to escort the pawn and wants to get to this g7 square, where it's going to exert a lot of influence. So rook g2 check, king f7, rook h2. Well, white played a very accurate move here. He went rook f6, and this cuts black's king off along the 6th rank. And it was no problem at all for white to win the game from here. It's just impossible for black to stop the advance of the h-pawn unless he gives up a rook. So let's go back. Well, much better than rook g2 would have been the move rook h2, getting behind the passed pawn and attacking it. That's what you want to do in these endings. You want to be aggressive. You want to be active. And well, white's king has to escort the white pawn, so he goes to g5, and now black's king goes king e6, crossing the 6th rank. And after, let's say, king g6, rook g2 check, harassing the king, king h7, well, black's king gets to e7, and black's king is close enough to the queening square in order for this ending to be drawn. So all white can really try here is rook a1, with the idea of some long distance lateral checks. Black's king takes the opportunity to come closer to f7. After rook a7 check, king f8 say, rook g7, try and move black's rook, but it simply goes, let's say, to a2. And after king h8, it comes back to h2. And after h7, well, black's just going to go into sentry duty with rook h1. There's nothing doing here. This is an easily drawn position. So in these endings, the Woldsman will not be identifying the players, but it's worth noting that white in this game was an international master, but even title players can make errors in endings, as we saw. Okay, so let's move on to Division 2. And here we have another rook and pawn ending. White, though, is a pretty good position. He's got his king in front of the passed pawn, very well placed on g2, and he's established a third rank defense, or a Philidor defense. That rook is beautifully positioned on a3 on the long side of the passed pawn. So things are looking really, really good for white, and he should simply carry out the defensive plan that Philidor demonstrated in 1777. King f2, waiting is a good move. Black can check. White's king digs in on the queening square, goes to f1. And now, to make progress, black has to advance the pawn to f3, but as soon as that pawn crosses the 6th rank, white redeploys the rook, goes to the 8th rank to check from behind. Gives these long distance vertical checks. And that is a standard theoretically drawn position. But we didn't see that happen on the board. And instead white went rook f3. So the idea of this move is to get the rook in front of the pawn. Well, he doesn't lose, but it certainly makes the defense a whole lot trickier. So black played rook c2 check, and now white went rook f2. And the idea is that if black exchanges rooks here, well, that would be an error, because you would trade down to a draw. White's king holds the opposition. So black didn't trade rooks, and he tried f3 check instead. And now white has to go king g1. If he goes king h1 or king h2, the rook is lost. And if he goes king f1, well, that would be disastrous. Black would give checkmate in one move with rook c1 check. So the only move in the position here is king g1. Black went rook c1 check. And now white found an only move. If he goes king h2, well, that's superficially attractive, but the problem is that black has the move rook e1, and he's going to go rook e2, and that's going to be good enough to win. So instead, he has to play rook f1. And again, if black trades rooks, then the king and pawn ending is a draw. Let's just verify that. Rook takes rook, king takes rook, king g3. Well, white's going to go king g1, and white has the opposition. So that's a drawn ending. So instead, black kept the game going. He went rook c4. Now, what should white do in this position? If you'd like to think about it, pause the video here. See if you can work out what white's best defensive options are in this position. Okay, well, welcome back. If you had a go at this. So in the game, white went rook a1, and this is a losing move. And it loses because the frontal defense, the first rank defense, fails against a bishop's pawn. It works if black had a knight's pawn instead. If that black pawn was on g3, then rook a1 would be a good move. But it fails here. And we saw this in the Waldsman's video of the classic game Mason versus MacLeod 1889. So after rook a1, the game ended king g3, king f1, and then black played the excellent rook c2. And here, if white goes king g1, then the method to win, which you need to remember, is to go rook g2 check. White goes king h1, you check again on h2. And if he goes king g1, which he has to, then you go f2 check. And after king f1, you skewer the rook with rook h1. So in fact, white tried something else. He went rook b1. But after rook h2, he was forced to resign. And the frontal defense fails against the bishop's pawn because there are two files on the short side of the pawn. With the knight's pawn, there's only one file, and it's the existence of this extra file that enables black to win by setting up a skewer along the first rank, winning the enemy rook. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back to the position that was set as a test. So rook a1 loses. Likewise, so would rook b1. Well, white could have held, but the idea was very hard to see, particularly given the time control. But the move to hold the game is rook f2. Now white must have been afraid of black's reply. Must have been afraid of king g3 in response to rook f2. But in fact, white has a drawing resource here. He can go rook g2 check, and this draws beautifully. Because if black goes pawn takes rook, well, that's stalemate. That's an immediate draw. If he tries king h3, well, white will simply go rook a2, and that's good enough to hold. Or if black goes king f4, then well, white can switch to Philidor's drawing method with rook g8. Okay, so why did white lose? Well, he lost because he turned an easy hold into a difficult save. And there just wasn't enough time to work out the nuances of the position. He couldn't find the idea of rook f2 and rook g2 check. So again, the Waldsman is not going to identify the players, but with the black pieces was a very strong junior player, coached by Grandmaster Chris Ward, and his coach must have been really pleased to see him pick up an extra half point with this ending. And his father, who's also a strong player, likewise must have been very happy. So that was a very good effort by black to win this game. Okay, so now we're on to Division 3. And no more rook and pawn endings. We've switched to an ending of bishop versus knight. White seems to be in a tight spot here. But he played a clever move. He played the move knight h3 here. The knight can't be taken because white then captures the pawn on f4. Now, although knight h3 is clever, there were other ways to draw. And the simplest was probably just to play king f6 here. And if black were to go bishop d3, then white has this move knight f7. And notice how the knight can now make use of the e5 square that's been vacated by the white king. And the idea is that if black goes f3, then white has got this beautiful fork on e5, knight e5 check, picking up the pawn and drawing the game. So that was one way to go. But white can also even go knight f7 here. That's also comes into consideration. And the idea is that if black goes f3, then white will go knight h6 check. And if black goes king h3, then white's going to take the bishop. And after f2, he can go knight e3, and the knight is in time to stop the pawn. So again, that was another way of drawing. And I think both of these alternatives have less risk than the move played, which was knight h3. Although knight h3 was a clever move. So the f pawn is attacked by the knight. It has to advance. It went to f3, of course. And now, after knight f2 check, black played king g3, attacking the knight. Now, everybody in chess has heard of the maxim, "A knight on the rim is always dim." Now, this saying is apparently attributed to Tarrasch, the famous German player. So it's a translation of a German expression. Ein Springer am Brand ist setzt einen Stand. That's what Tarash wrote. Now for sure, a knight has fewer squares on the side of the board, and the fewest squares of all when the knight is in a corner. But that is where the knight needed to go here. So the drawing move is knight h1 check, and this is why knight h3, although a clever move, is not the easiest approach to the position, because this knight h1 check is counterintuitive, and it goes against what players are taught. Players are taught that a knight on the rim is always dim, but there are exceptions to every rule, and this is one of the exceptions. So after king g2, white goes king f4, and well, black is going to have to organize a defense of the f3 pawn, so he has to put his bishop back to d7. The white king comes to e3, and after bishop c6, well, white rescues the knight. He goes knight f2, and this is a cast iron draw. But that didn't happen in the game, and instead white abided by Tarash's dictum, and he went knight d1. And this move should lose, but the win is far from easy. But black can win by going bishop d3 here. He's covering this important e4 square. White goes king d4, and now black goes bishop c2. Notice that bishop e2 is no good because white has knight c3, and if the pawn advances, white is taking the bishop with check. Sorry, no, if the pawn advances, what am I saying? White has got knight e4 check. That's the drawing idea. Sorry, apologies for that. You have to be alert in these endings. Of course you do. Okay. So instead, black goes bishop c2, and now after knight e3, he goes f2. And well, white's got a choice here, but both choices are going to lose. He can go king c3, that's an option. Black goes king f4, attacking the knight. Knight has to go to f1. And now the bishop falls back to f5, and it's covering a lot of squares on f5. It's very well positioned. And notice how also black's king is covering a lot of squares. So those two pieces coordinate very, very well, posing problems for black. Sorry, posing problems for white. White goes king d2, and now black goes king f3, and it's Zugzwang. If the king moves away, then black is going to go king g2 or king e2, and if the knight moves away to h2, then black again is going to go king g2, winning. So that's what happens after king c3. So white can also try this move knight f1 check here. Black goes king f4, opposing. And this principle of the opposition is it's not just something you find in king and pawn endings. Having the opposition or opposing kings can be effective in other endings as well, including this one. White goes knight d2. Now this is a clever move. Black goes bishop e4. Again, the king and the bishop coordinate very, very well, denying white's king lots of squares, particularly d3 and e3. And of course the bishop cannot be taken because the pawn then promotes. So white goes knight f1. Now black goes to b7. He wants to get on this long diagonal. That's an important diagonal. Knight d2, say, bishop a6. Now the knight can't go back to f1. It's controlled by the bishop. So white again has to try something else. He can't move his knight away. The pawn queens, he can't move his knight to f1. And black controls these squares. So the white king has to move away from the pawn. Goes to c3. Black king again opposes. See that theme again. King has to come to c2. Now black goes bishop e2, controlling squares. So white kings has to go back to c3. And now black goes bishop d3. And it's a Zugzwang. If the white king moves, the knight falls. The knight moves to f1, it's lost. If the knight moves away, the pawn will queen. So black wins. But this was a very difficult win to see. And sadly, black couldn't find it. Instead of going bishop d3, he went bishop h3. And this left e4 unguarded, so white went king e4. Now there's a nice route for white's king to take. And after bishop f1, king e3, bishop e2, white went knight f2. And the game was drawn. So plenty of action then in that Division 3 clash. Okay, so finally to Division 4. And the Woldsman has saved the best until last. This was an absolutely incredible position. Take a moment to look at it, take it in. So white's a piece and a pawn up, and this pawn is on the 7th rank. It's one square away from queening. But it would be a mistake to queen this pawn, because if white goes g8 equals queen, or for that matter equals rook or equals bishop, then black has knight h6 check, and he's forking the king and the new queen or new rook or new bishop. Then he's going to take that piece on g8, and that's going to leave white with two knights against a lone king, and two knights versus a king cannot deliver mate. So the game will be drawn. And so in this position, white played the correct g8 equals knight. And now we have this remarkable ending of three knights versus knight. The game concluded king c4. White went king e6, attacking the knight. Knight d4 check happened. White went king e5. Black checked again on c6. White went king d6. Black went knight d4. And in this position, a draw was agreed. Now, the circumstances behind this decision are unclear. It's possible that white had no time, but it's also possible that he simply thought the ending was drawn, and so agreed to the draw. Now, the ending of three knights versus a lone knight is extraordinarily rare. You have to have an under promotion, and the superior player has to not have exchanged either of his knights for it to appear on the board. But it is in fact won for the stronger side. And all you really need to do to win is to appreciate the knight's ability to generate a force field. And the 50 move rule shouldn't come into it, provided white exercises reasonable care. It's actually a really fun ending to play, and the marauding knights are absolutely amazing. So from the final position, well, a plausible continuation might be knight e7, activating this newly promoted knight. Let's say black gives a check. White goes king e5. Black's knight returns to d4. We'll try and keep the king and knight together, and black will try and keep his king in the middle of the board. It's a reasonable strategy. White could go king e4 here, activating the king, controlling some squares. Let's play king c5, again try and keep the king central. And now white could go knight e8. This ending is going to be about force fields. Notice that already those two knights together are controlling quite a few squares around black's king. So let's go back to c4. Again, we'll activate another knight. Those three knights are now in a great little reverse L formation. Black goes knight b5. White goes knight e5 check. So let's try and keep the king in the middle of the board. And so now let's play king d3. Again, look at all these squares that that white is controlling. A little noose is beginning to form around the head of the black king in this position. So maybe king b4. And notice that the lone knight is very, very vulnerable. So for instance, if it goes knight d6, then white can play knight d7 and that knight drops off. So you can't do that. So let's instead play this move king b4 to stop the knight getting gobbled up. So now knight d7 again. Force field. King b3. Knight c6. I mean, these knight formations are just absolutely beautiful. Say king b2. Knight c5. And let's see, what is black to do here? Well, if black goes king a3, then king c4 picks up the knight. Because white controls all of the squares that the knight can go to, and it also controls a4 and b4. So the king cannot come to the support of the knight. So instead, let's see what happens when the black king tries to cut and run. So let's play here king c1. Okay, knight f6, bringing this distant knight into the action. In fact, maybe let's play knight e4 instead. Actually, that looks a better move. Yeah, that's what we want. A little force field here. We can bring the e8 knight into the game in a moment or two. Let's go with this knight e4 move instead. Black carries on with his dash. Now we'll bring this knight into play to f6. Black's king keeps running. So we'll go knight g4. Again, we've got a barrier, a force field. So black goes king f1, try and get around the force field. Bring this knight over. Notice that we're keeping an eye on this lone knight as well. It's not able to come to the assistance of black's king. And it's quite easy to combine moves that hound the king and restrict the enemy knight. So black goes king g2. Knight e3 check. Again, these knights lined up really beautifully. Again, controlling so many squares. Okay, king h3 getting out of check. And now knight f5. Again, force fields. So black has to go back, king g2. White's king gets into the action. And black's king is cornered, so he moves his knight somewhere, moves the knight to a3. And now knight e3, again lining the knights up beautifully. Another check. Black goes king h3. White's king follows the enemy. So now black's king keeps running. He runs to h4. And from here there's a nice little mating sequence. First move is knight g6 check. King h5. Knight f4 check. Again, force field. So black goes king h6. And at first sight it looks as though black's king is escaping, but it's not going to be allowed to escape. White goes knight f5 check. And well, the only move, because of the force field, is king h7 here. So black goes king h7. And now knight f6 check. Again, there's only one move. King h8. And now knight g6 check. And that's checkmate. The end of the game. So the triple knights, hunting as a pack like this are a truly awesome cavalry trio. It's a great shame that White missed the chance to enjoy this ending. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the 4 endings from the 4 NCL.